Okay, students, it's Mr. James and I'm back with another video. And in this video, we are going to learn how to convert between a fraction and a decimal. So what that means is we're going to learn how to change a fraction to a decimal for many reasons. So it's very simple. And the only thing you have to do is divide the numerator by the denominator. So to change a fraction to a decimal, the rule is you divide the numerator by the denominator. So let's go at it really quick. One thing to remember that a fraction is division. The bar separates the numerator from the denominator through division. So let's look at a fraction. We have 3/5. So our job is to change 3/5 into a decimal. That's our job. So when we rewrite this, we want to write it as 3 is being divided by 5. That is how you write that. 3 is being divided by 5. And we also have rules with dividing. I'm just going to write letters to the side to help. If you need that, we divide, we multiply, we subtract, and we bring down. And you also have R. Some people use R for remainder, but when we're dividing and we want to change it to the decimal, we don't want to have a remainder unless we have to, unless it reoccurs. And we'll talk about what that looks like later. So let's get into the problem. I know that 5 cannot go into 3 because 5 is too big. So I'm just going to start off by putting a 0 on top of that 3. And since we want to change a fraction to a decimal, this is where the decimal comes into play. We're going to add a decimal behind the 3 and also add a 0 because adding a 0 behind the 3 doesn't change the value. It's still 3. And since we added a decimal right here in our dividend, we're also going to go straight up and add a decimal in our quotient. So now, instead of looking at it as how many times can 5 go into 3, we're now looking at it as how many times can 5 go into 30. We're going to pretend that that decimal is no longer there. So we know that 5 can go into 30 6 times because 6 times 5 will give me 30. My next step is to subtract, and 30 minus 30 will give me 0. So I know that if I change the fraction 3/5 into a decimal, that answer will be 0 and 6/10. Let's look at another one. Let's change the fraction 1/4 to a decimal. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to take 1 and we're going to divide it by 4. So once again, 4 is bigger than 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 0 in my quotient. But we want to make it a decimal, so I'm going to add a decimal behind the 1 and add that 0. And remember, when we add the decimal in our dividend, we also need to add it to our quotient. Now, we're going to ask ourselves, well, how many times can 4 go into 10? Think about it. If you said 2, you're correct. 4 can go into 10 twice. Because 2 times 4 will give me 8. When I subtract 10 from 8, I will now get 2. But listen, remember we said we don't want a remainder if we don't have to have one. So I can continue to add zeros until I have no remainder. So I'm going to add another 0 because that value still hasn't changed. It's still 1. And I'm going to bring my 0 down. Now I'm going to ask myself, well, how many times can 4 go into 20? And that answer will be 5. Because 4 times 5 4 times 5 will give me 20. And when I subtract, I no longer have a remainder. So when we convert 1/4 into a decimal, that decimal will be 0 and 25 hundredths. Let's try one more. Let's look at one more. And it'll follow the exact same pattern. Let's look at 2/3. Now you set it up. You should have 2 being divided by 3. First step, we know 3 can't go into 2. It's too big. We're going to put a 0, okay? We're going to add our decimal behind the 2 because we want to change the fraction to a decimal. We're going to add a 0. Once again, when we put our decimal in our dividend, we also put it in our quotient. Okay, and now we are going to divide. How many times can 3 go into 20? Or was 20 divided by 3, however you would like to say it? Well, that answer is going to give me 6. And 6 times 3 is 18. After we multiply, the next step is to subtract. 20 minus 18 will give me 2. Well, let's see if we can get rid of that remainder. Let's add another 0. Bring it down. We get 20 again. And let's just keep going. 3 going to 20 again, only 6 times. 6 times 3 is going to give me 18. I'm going to subtract. And I'm going to get 2 again. Now, if you're keeping up, you can see that this pattern will continue. I'll subtract, I'll get 18. I'll multiply, and get 18. When I subtract 20 from 18, I'll get 2. I'll add a 0. I'll continue to do this, and that 2 will never go away. So any event that a remainder will never go away, this is what you do. In your quotient, you'll just put a line over the last value to let us know that that number will always repeat. I know that if I add that 0 there, I'm going to say it goes into it 6 more times. 18, subtracting it 2. So this is a recurring decimal that will never end. It'll be 0.66666 if you just keep going out. So instead of writing all of that with your final answer, you will put a line over the reoccurring number to let us know that it will always repeat. So that's how you do it one way, but there is another way, an easy way. Let's look at it. Of course, I want you to know how to do it this way, and I expect you to know how to do it this way. But also, sometimes you might have a calculator. And now let's look at how to do it in a calculator. It's pretty simple. If we had the fraction 3/5, well, that's 3 divided by 5, and that's exactly how I put it in the calculator. I would put 3 divided by 5. And we see that 3 divided by 5 is 0 and 6/10, like we got when we did it the other way. Let's do it again. Well, we did 1/4. So 1 divided by 4. That gives us 0 and 25 hundredths, like we previously did. And we also did 2/3. So that's 2 divided by 3. And you see that it was 0.666, and it continues. But remember, instead of writing all of those 6's out, we'll just put a line over the 6 to let us know that it reoccurs. So we have 2 ways. Our job is to learn both of them. That's all I have for you.